There's a ton of advice on YouTube about how to have a successful YouTube channel. Advice ranges from how to write good, successful titles, how to formulate titles, how to think about titles, varying various versions of your titles, and then of course about how to edit a good thumbnail so that it's eye-catching, so that it's going to stop the scroll and these kinds of things, and then of course editing your hook for the video so that it has good retention and leads to good watch time. People stick around not just for the beginning of the video, but for the whole video, and we can go on and on and on about all the advice that we can find on YouTube about having a good YouTube channel. And of course, a lot of this advice is good. It's good to make sure that you have a good thumbnail that people are going to really get intrigued by and then want to watch your video, or a good title that both summarizes your video, not summarizes, but intrigues your potential viewer to want to click on it so that they know what they're getting in for, know what to expect to some degree, but also intrigues them so that they watch the whole thing. And of course, editing is a big part of that as well. So all these things are important. But sometimes when we look at all this advice from various people on YouTube, we might think, man, that's just so much stuff in order to try to have a good, successful YouTube channel. And it is. It's a lot of stuff. But I also want us to think about how the people who are giving these kinds of advice, oftentimes myself too, we don't know your channel. We don't know the intricacies of your audience specifically. So when you hear all this advice on YouTube, take it with a grain of salt. I mean, it's important to know. It's important to know the principles that make for good titles. It's important to know the principles that make for good thumbnails and good hooks and all these things. But it's also important to know that you know your audience better than anyone else on the internet, or at least that should be your goal. That should be your goal, to know your audience so well that you know when you can break these rules. Now, am I saying that to throw out all the rules whatsoever? Of course not. These rules are rules for a reason, and they can oftentimes be very, very helpful in terms of thinking about the titles that we make and the thumbnails that we make and the hooks that we edit and these kinds of things. But when it comes down to it, you alone are going to make the decisions that are going to impact your channel. And be informed, of course, and learn what you can learn, but then also be able to say, I know my audience so well that this principle about titles or this principle about thumbnails just doesn't apply to them, or at least it applies to them in a different way. There's a rule in photography that basically says know the rules and know when to break the rules. And that's exactly what I'm saying right now. Know when it is that you can look at your audience and say, I'm going to throw out all the traditional YouTube advice and focus on what it is that my audience truly wants to see. So here's what I want you to do. Don't stop watching all of these YouTube experts. They're experts for a reason. It's popular now on YouTube to say that all these experts really don't know what they're talking about. They do. They've been around a long time. They've seen YouTube change. They've seen what works on YouTube, what doesn't work on YouTube. So they're experts for a reason. And yet at the same time, recognize that you are the expert, or at least should be the expert for your channel specifically. Take all their advice, filter it through the lens of your ideal viewer, and then make it for them. Don't make it for YouTube's algorithm or YouTube's experts. Make it for you and your audience. If you can figure out how to do that and how it applies to your channel, that's when you'll see significant growth on YouTube. Because the thing is, on YouTube nowadays, there's not one size fits all. There's 8 billion people on this planet, and like almost 3 billion of them are watching YouTube almost every single day. And that's a lot of variety. And to say that everyone's going to fall into one way of clicking on a video, or one way of watching a video, or one way to edit a video, that's simply not the case. We need to recognize that every segment of the population, every channel is going to have a unique set of people who are going to be watching that channel specifically, and they're going to have certain characteristics, certain thoughts that are unique to them alone. When you tap into that, when you realize that you're making it for them, not for the world at large, but for your audience specifically, that's when you'll figure out how to do your titles, your thumbnails, your editing, your hook, and all this kind of thing. Be aware of the advice, be aware of the rules, but know when you can break the rules for you and your audience. Hey, I don't have this all figured out just yet, but I'm working on it. And if I can do it, you can do it too. I'm just an average guy.